The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to Bronx Talk. Tonight's guest is a Bronx Council member who is the chair of the city's powerful Land Use Committee, which puts him right in the center of some of the most important dialogues in New York. What should go where? We're going to ask him about the deal to bring Amazon to the city and a last-mile facility to the Bronx. Also, what about his own legislation to boost the creation of housing for the homeless? His South Bronx district is also ground zero, unfortunately, for opioid use, and we'll find out what he's doing to fight the scourge of drugs in the Bronx. We'll also talk about the effort to close Rikers and a host of other issues related to both land use and his own district. Please join me in welcoming back to Bronx Talk the council member from the 17th District in the Bronx, which includes the Bronx neighborhoods of Concourse Village, East Tremont, Hunts Point, Longwood, Melrose, Morrisania, Port Morris, West Farms. Council member Rafael Salamanca, nice to have you.
Gary, thank you for having me.
Let's start with your bill, and I know you feel very strongly about it, and I think it is, I think you mentioned to me the other day that it was veto-proof, and that is this idea that any developer who receives city funding or grant funding must provide 15% of the allocations for people who are homeless. Talk about the rationale behind it, and then we'll break it down a little bit.
So Gary, so as you know, the city of New York, we are in a housing homeless crisis. Last night, 63 individuals slept in a homeless shelter. And so as development is happening throughout the city of New York, it's important that we, the council members or the decision makers who are approving these projects, we're really thinking out of the box. In the 3 years that I've been in office, I've approved a little over 6,500 units of 100% affordable housing. 4,500 units of new housing, and I've preserved over 2,000 units of housing. In these negotiations, I've met with many developers, and I've met with the city about a homeless set-aside. And if you look at my projects, how I've approved them, I first started off with a 10% homeless set-aside, but I felt that a dent needed to be made. And when I became the chair of the Land Use Committee, I was sitting on a table and I was observing how my colleagues were negotiating their bills. And there were quite a few colleagues that were negotiating down the homeless set-aside that the city of New York was asking them to do. It was not codified in law. So I sat down with my team and I said, you know, we need to do better by homeless families that are ready for independent living. And in order to do that, we submitted this bill, which we have 36 co-sponsors, which would make any project that's getting any city subsidies would require that developer set aside 15% of those units for homeless families.
Will it make it more difficult to finance affordable housing projects in terms of developers say, you know what, we don't want to take the time to do this. We also, the expense of funding something like this is something we don't want to do.
No, absolutely not. You know, when you look at the amount of money that the city of New York is spending to house homeless New Yorkers, we're talking about almost $3 billion that we're spending just on housing homeless New Yorkers. When you're taking a family and you're putting them into a homeless shelter, the city of New York is paying up to $3,600 per month per family. Now, that entire $3,600 is not going to rent, but the city of New York is paying way above market rate for those apartments. So this bill, in essence, will put families that are ready for independent living, put them into their own apartment, their permanent apartment, and the city will save dollars.
The mayor was quoted in the Times as saying, "I don't want to send a message that the only folks who can get affordable housing are folks who end up in shelters. I think it's wrong for everyone." He, I think, had talked about 5%. What's your thought or comment on what you heard there?
Gary, this mayor has been blinded on this issue. Homelessness has increased under the mayor's watch. And basically what this plan does is that it would make a dent in the homeless population. It would take families who are ready for independent living. It would take families that are working and are in a homeless shelter and are just waiting for that opportunity to be placed in a permanent apartment.
Who pays for those apartments?
The city of New York.
The city of New York will pay, and at least the way you've broken it down for us is that will turn about as a result of having to spend less in shelters.
Well, so you have families that are currently working, that are in a shelter system. If you take those families and you put them into a permanent housing, 30% of their income will go to pay for rent.
The bill, as I established earlier, and you mentioned to me that it is veto-proof. And where is it at? What is the timing of it? And when will you be really happy?
Yeah, so I'm excited. At the moment, we have 36 co-sponsors. We needed 34 to veto-proof this bill. I met with the mayor's office last week. Their tone is different now because they know that we have the upper hand here. The Speaker of the City Council, Speaker Corey Johnson, is supportive of this bill. We're going to have another conversation with the administration, but my office is in constant communication with the Speaker's office, and we're trying to push this bill as soon as possible for a vote in committee, and then as stated.
There's a lot of excitement, certainly in the mayor's office and the governor's office, about Amazon coming to New York City. They talk about 25,000 jobs. They talk about renovating a whole section of Long Island City. But city council members like yourself are concerned that they circumvented the ULURP process. Good deal for the city, bad deal for the city?
Well, yes, there is many pros to Amazon coming into Long Island City. And the job creations that it would, the amount of job creations that it would bring, the revenue that the state and the city would generate from the taxes. But they totally circumvented the democratic process. Whether you like the ULURP process, which is, the land use process application
there
or not.
There are some issues with it.
They are.
As you know.
But that is a process that we have right now. And that process allows community input. That process allows the community board, the borough president, the city planning commission, and ultimately the city council members to work with their community to negotiate the best package, the best deal possible. The mayor and the governor circumvented that process, and therefore the community did not have their say. And so while I think that there can be many benefits from bringing in Amazon to Long Island City, ultimately they circumvented the democratic process, and I do not agree with the decision that they made.
As I understand, there will be a hearing for the city council, and they're going to bring people in and review it. How do you see that playing out? I mean, is there a chance that they're going to say, well, sorry, Governor Cuomo, and sorry, Mayor de Blasio, but we're going to vote it down, or somehow put something in place that will prevent it?
Well, ultimately, in the city council, we've had 2 hearings so far. There was an economic development committee meeting that met with Amazon a few weeks ago. Just last week, the finance committee met with Amazon on the financing, what type of financing the city is going to put into this project. And at the end of the month, there's going to be a land use committee hearing with Amazon.
Which you will chair.
Which I will chair. Ultimately, the city of New York will not be a decision maker here. But in order for this deal to go through, and in order for them to get their tax credits that the governor promised them, there's a board in the state level which needs to approve of this. And there are 3 members. You have the governor appoints a member, the assembly, so Speaker Hasty appoints a member, and the majority leader of the Senate appoints a member. And today in the Observer, there was an article where Senator Gianaris, who's a senator in that area and is a big critic of Amazon, has just been appointed to that board. In order for that project to pass that board, there has to be a unanimous vote. And as Senator Janaris has said, he is critical of this. So we'll see where this goes.
Stay tuned is, I guess, what we're talking about. Many Bronxites were concerned. It's very interesting because you and I were talking just before the program about La Peninsula, which you're, I think, appropriately excited about coming to Hunts Point. It's an affordable housing development, et cetera, et cetera. But the Amazon is putting a last mile facility in there, which, you know, if you read Bronx social media as closely as I do, the first words that came out were trucks, trucks, trucks. We're getting more trucks. You know, on one hand, you're getting good housing, you're taking down Spofford, you know, which really is good development for the Bronx. On the other hand, well, guess what? We're putting in another facility for another mega corporation that's going to bring trucks through that area and through the Bronx. What's your thought about the last mile? Is that related to the Amazon in Long Island City, or is it kind of a different dialogue?
Well, first, the Spofford project, I'm extremely excited about it. Over 750 units of 100% affordable housing. It's a mixed income building, so their units will be set aside for homeless families. They're very, very low income in the working families. And there will also be light manufacturing. There'll be job creation there. So I'm excited about that project. The Amazon last mile project, I found out about it about a week and a half ago through the media. Immediately when we read about it, I actually read it on Welcome to the Bronx. There was a clip on it. Right. We called the council. We got in contact with the Amazon folks that are working on the Long Island City project, and they stated that they did not know that this was happening. They had to call their headquarters. And so immediately we got on a conference call with the community leaders. I got the local elected officials that represent that area on the call, the local community board. There's still a lot of information that we do not have. They stated that this may create up to 30 jobs. There's also an opportunity.
30 is not a lot.
30,
we're thrilled if Bronx people get 30 jobs. Yeah. But that you know, if you're sacrificing, you know, young people's lungs and the danger of airborne disease, 30 jobs is not quite
30 jobs is not a lot. But that is that's their process for their warehousing. There's also, it's my understanding that there's going to be an opportunity for independent contractors to do deliveries. However, they have to put a plan together, and they have to come and make a proper presentation to the local community board. But something that we must something that's of importance is that they're moving in as of right. There are no city subsidies. There's nothing that the city is giving them. So in essence, they can move in.
They can do what
they can move in.
want to do.
But there's still a lot of work that needs to happen. There's a lot of information that needs to be disclosed to the community, and we're working on getting that information.
You, and we're going to talk about it, you are very concerned about the Vernon C. Bain Center, which is part of Rikers. But I want to ask about the Horizon Detention Center. It seems to me that when they moved young people to the Horizon Detention Center, and there was just terrible stories that came through of violence, and it wasn't, to me, it didn't look like it was managed right. What happened there, and couldn't that have that whole controversy? And again, once you have young people in detention, and then you have correction officers who, you know, good for them, they're trying to do their job right, but then they get beaten up. I mean, that's not a good process. You don't have to be a genius to know that. What, and that is in your district. What happened there? Yeah.
So, you know, the state a year ago passed the raised the age, removing the 16 and 17-year-olds out of Rikers, and placing them into a juvenile detention center. The state gave the city a deadline in which they needed to meet. The city, to be honest, Gary, the city was not prepared to meet that deadline.
Was that an MOU that the city had signed, or a kind of an assignment from the state?
No, there was a law passed which the state says this is the deadline that you must pass, and so the state, the city was not ready. They did not retrofit. They were not ready to retrofit the building. They wanted to bring in new programs to the facility, and basically you were taking 16 and 17-year-olds that were in a jail facility, and now you're putting them into a different type of environment.
Without any structure, without the proper programming in place. I mean, they go on and on and on.
And the correction officers and ACS, there was confusion
About who should do
as to how they were running the operation there. And so there was major hiccups in the first couple of weeks. There was major violence, which was reported.
Is your sense right now that it's under control?
It is under control. We speak on a monthly basis now. We speak with the ACS Deputy Commissioner. There are issues where there's fights, there is violence that occurs, but not to, it's night and day from what happened in the very beginning when they moved
It
them
was quite disturbing to
Yes.
hear. We certainly, any young people incarcerated or not, you don't want to hear that, and certainly protecting our correction officers is of paramount importance. All right, that same neighborhood is, I mentioned it at the top of the show, is ground zero for opioids. Let's see, now the mayor's got a Bronx action plan. You have the Bronx Opioid Collective Impact Project. Do we have competing plans, and how are we going to get everybody together, and what's your vision about what needs to be done specifically in the hub area and that whole area right around 149th and 3rd Avenue?
The Bronx Opioid Collective was formed prior to the mayor announcing his Bronx Action Plan to address the issues of opioid use on 149th Street, 3rd Avenue, and St. Mary's Park, that entire corridor. The Bronx Collective, basically we got together with all the stakeholders in the area, Lincoln Hospital, Boom, Acacia, the St. Anne's Harm Reduction, and other community-based organizations to form a plan as to how can we bring services to these individuals that are addicted to opioid and they're openly using in the street.
It is incredible. If you go to that area, you can just see it. It's just, it's disturbing on, goodness, so many levels.
And so a few weeks ago, the mayor announced a $8 million allocation to his plan, and that came from the advocacy of our Bronx Collective opioid plan. And so we were able to convince the administration that more needs to be done. And in order for more to be done, you need to bring in programming, you need to bring in personnel, you need to bring in boots, people on the ground that can help get these individuals off the streets and put them into programming. And so I applaud the mayor for really putting his money where his mouth is and allocating $8 million to this program.
The concept that you're working on, a collective impact project, in my mind is really the only way to address this. I mean, you can't do it with law enforcement, and you can't just do it with drug treatment, because we've been down that road, and it turns out to be a recycling mill. Do you get the sense that there is already impact, or this is going to be the kind of thing that's going to have to be long-term, and to begin with, you're going to need to engage people in a dialogue before you can even get them in a program or really find out what their issues are?
Gary, we need to understand that this is going to be a long-term process. 149th Street and 3rd Avenue is oversaturated with methadone clinics, needle exchange programs, illegal drug selling, and you also have multiple shelters, safe haven shelters that which cater to individuals that have substance abuse issues there. And so this is decades in the making. And so as part of this Bronx collective, what we've done is that we've advocated with the administration. We've spoken to the state, where we're telling the state we need to cut down on the amount of methadone clinics that we have in the immediate area. We need to kind of spread the wealth. We understand that there's a need, but over-concentration in one area, we're going to get what we have right now, which is users using directly in the streets. Something else that I've been supportive.
Let me just interject. Methadone clinics, we've been down that road. You can load them up anywhere you want. You're not, you may be addressing certain aspects of it, but you're not solving a major opioid crisis.
The other aspect of this is that I've been supportive of the safe injection sites program that the mayor rolled out, where you provide a safe location where users can come in, their drugs will get tested, but prior to you using, you see a social worker. There's a conversation to see if they can get you into some type of programming.
The idea is to engage. I've spoken to many experts. The idea is to engage them.
The idea is to engage them. The idea is to get them the help that they need. The idea is to get them off opioid, put them into programming so that they can restart their life again.
Because in many cases, and I want to move on to another aspect of this, but in many cases it is things in their lives. It could also be pain, and we know that that's the case right now in terms of what their motivation is, from surgery. I mean, 100 different things. I want to ask about this idea of the needle, because you talked about safe injection zones, this idea of needle drop boxes in parks. Now, local people have said St. Mary's Park is overrun now. Great, you basically sent a message out to drug users, come here to the park, drop your needles in our boxes, which they didn't do anyway, and there was a major outcry of the number of needles found where children play and where people try to recreate safely. What's your thought about, was that a bad idea?
No, Gary, we have a crisis here. Individuals are openly using in our parks and in our streets. In St. Mary's Park, they're using and they're dumping their needles on the grass. They're dumping their needles in the park. If we picked up 1,000 needles, if 1,000 needles were placed inside that sharp container, then that's 1,000 needles less that were lying around in the park. Can we do better? Absolutely. It's still in its very early stages. There's conversations that the administration, Parks Department are having with local leaders. But we need to think out of the box to see how we're going to resolve this issue and improve our quality of life and make our parks safer.
Is that a criminal justice issue that, you get enforcement officials saying, you know what, you can't be shooting up here?
Well, there's a conversation.
I mean, that becomes a conflict with some of the concerns.
Yeah, well,
earlier.
Look, openly using is illegal. There needs to be enforcement. There needs to be a police presence there. But there also has to be a conversation with the district attorney's office. There has to have a conversation with the judges. If we are removing these individuals who are breaking the law and openly using in the street, the solution is not putting them in jail. The solution is mandating programming, which is something that the district attorney's office and the judges have to agree to, and they have to enforce.
Today is the 20th anniversary of the tragedy of Amadou Diallo being gunned down by 41 police bullets in Soundview. Just curious about your thoughts about what had happened then, and have we done better, and then, of course, characterize police-community relations in your district.
Today is the 20th anniversary. I remember I was 18 years old at the time. I remember.
Nobody's counting.
I remember seeing the outcry in the community, the concern of my parents. Me being a young Latino, going to school or just walking down the street. The concerns of my neighbors. This can happen to them. This can happen to anyone in our communities. I think that the NYPD has done a better job in community and police relations. I think the NCO program, the NCO program has helped. It's kind of bringing back that beat cop program back to the neighborhood.
Are people receptive?
Where in my community, I mean, it's challenging. I have a good portion of my community who there's still trust issues with the police department.
There's baggage there.
However, I think that the NYPD is moving in the right direction. They need to continue on with these programs, engaging the community, having those familiar faces who are patrolling our streets. We know who they are. They know who we are. It's all about relationship building, and I think that the NYPD is doing a good job with this.
Before I ask you who you might be supporting for public advocate, last week on our program, your colleague, Councilmember Richie Torres, said, I haven't chosen a candidate yet, but I don't think we need a public advocate to begin with, and he was very clear about it, and I've heard this from a number of people, and definitely the dialogue is out there. Do we need a public advocate's office? And then, of course, the next question will be, who do you support?
Yeah, I think a public advocate's office, they provide a crucial role here. They have a platform where there's checks and balances on the mayor. Yes, the city council's there for checks and balances, but there's another office there, which is the public advocate's office, a Defensor del Pueblo, who is there. Their responsibilities not to just call out the mayor's office, but call out any city agency that's not doing right by the city of New York. And yes, I have a candidate. I am supporting Michael Blake. He is my assembly member. I've worked hand in hand with Michael Blake on many issues in NYCHA. We share the third largest NYCHA portfolio in the city of New York. When elevators are down, when there's water's not being provided, when heat is not working, when the quality of life of my constituents in the NYCHA developments have failed, Michael Blake has been with me hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, addressing these issues. I think Michael Blake brings a unique perspective as to how government works, and I'm excited to be supporting Assemblymember Blake.
The problems with NYCHA in that district have existed before this current public advocate or the race for public advocate, and for years of public advocacy. They didn't have impact before. They weren't able to stop the latest scourge of, we had problems, as you know, with heat and lead paint and the whole thing. Why would we think that, was it the personnel? Are we looking at personnel, or is it really that the position has no real legislative power, no subpoena power, and maybe it's nice to have an advocate, but really, where's it going?
Well, these are conversations that we should be having now that there's a city charter revision commission that's taking place as to how can we bring more power to the public advocate's office. But something that I want to point out, it's important that the public advocate, the next public advocate, is an independent voice of the mayor. Yes, there should be a relationship. There should be, you should be able to work with the mayor. However, you don't want a puppet a puppet of the mayor to have that role of a public advocate. You have someone, again, that needs to be independent of that. And I think that that's what, when you look at you have many good candidates across the board. But I think that Michael Blake stands out when we're talking about someone that will be independent of the mayor.
Well, it certainly has been a launching pad. We now have a mayor who is a public advocate, and we also have the Attorney General who is a public advocate. Councilmember Salamanca, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time, and I can guarantee you we're going to call you and have you back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, folks, if you have further questions or comments on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, then email them to us at BronxTalk@BronxNet.org. You send a tweet at BronxTalk. I'll post them on our Facebook page. We do thank our producer, Helen Greenberg, and our director is Lucy Dominguez. And guess what's going to happen? We'll see you next week.